Hello US, welcome to QTP functional testing videos. Myself Uday. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate you about how to work with data tables. Whenever we test an application, we don't rely completely our testing on a single test data, right? Rather, we will be testing with the same test case with multiple test data. So what I'm trying to say here is, for example, say uh, we have a function called insert customer with name. Say as an example, I'm trying to insert a customer with name A. Okay, so we don't test for example in our test case, right? It is not at all a good practice to test the test case with a single test data. So rather what we will do, we will test the same test case with multiple test data, right? So how we will be testing with multiple test data? Like we will be writing a code like this. So insert customer A, insert customer B, and insert customer C. We will write a code like this, right? So when you write code, uh, as I mentioned in here, it is not at all a good practice to write a code like this, right? Because the code is not at all readable format and it is very hard to maintain the automation scripts, right? So what we generally do is we will replace this constant with a parameter. That is what we call parameterization. Okay, so if you write a code like this, right, it is almost like hard coding the values. It, for example, say tomorrow if you want to replace B with some xyz, you need to go through the whole code where you have written with inserting customer with B. It is not at all a good practice, right? So rather what we will do, we will write a function called like insert customer with some parameter. Okay, so for each iteration, this parameter hold a different value. For example, in the first iteration, it will hold a value of A. In the second iteration, it will hold a value of B. In the third iteration, it will hold a value of C. Respectively, for each iteration, it will pick up the different values, and from there, uh, the function will be, it is almost like the same thing, but the parameter will be holding a different value for each iteration. Okay, so where we have to configure all these values, right? We have to configure somewhere A, B, C, these values, right? So these values can be configured in an external data sources. Okay, these external data sources can be a text file, it can be a CSV file, it can be a Excel file, or it can be a database, right? So in order to provide such kind of parameterization, QTP provides a functionality called data table. So let's see how exactly looks like the data table and how to work with data table. Okay, so this is how the data table looks like, right? Which is exactly looks like an Excel sheet. In Excel sheet, what we will have? We will be having multiple data sets. In the same way, QTP data table also contains multiple data sheets. So, for example, say in your uh, system, right? You may not be directly viewing this data table, right? In order to view data table, you need to click on this data table icon, or else make sure that in view there is an option called data table. You need to select this data table, then only the data table will be displayed. If you uncheck this, the data table won't be displayed anywhere, right? So you just choose view data table, then the data table get displayed. You can hide and unhide it. Okay, so once you click data table, data table will come up. Okay, so uh, let's see how we can read the values from a data table and how we can set values in a data table. Okay, before going further, let's see. There are two sheets by default. If you create any test, it will be displayed with a two sheets. One is the global sheet and another one is action sheet, right? You can create as number of actions in your test. For each action you create, it will create a data sheet here, right? For example, the usage of global data sheet would be like, for example, you have multiple actions and the data needs to be accessed from the multiple actions, then that kind of data can be configured in global data table. Whereas if the data is specific to any action, then configure that data with respect to the any specific action. Okay, if it is the data can be used in multiple actions, put all that data in global data sheet, right? Okay, so let's see how to retrieve a data from a data table and how we can write the data in a data table. So uh, in this example, what I want to do is I want to create two columns called input one. You just need to double click on this column header, okay, to provide a input parameter for it. So input 2 and uh, some value. Okay, in this example what I am trying to do here is I will be taking two values, okay, input 1 and input 2, and put the sum of these two values into my third parameter. Okay, so for that I will be giving some random test data. Okay, so we can configure our test data like this. See, for in my test, right, I will be testing with this multiple test data, right? Okay. 26 something like 9, whatever it is, right? This is my sample test data. Okay, now how can we retrieve these values from first row, first parameter, first row, second parameter? I need to retrieve these two values and sum up these two values and have the result to be set into my third parameter, right? For that, what we will do is first I need to find out, I need to iterate through each individual row, right? So once I have, for what I mean to say here is in the first iteration, it should hold these two values. In my second iteration, it should hold these two values. Like that, I need to go traverse through all these rows. For that, I need to find out the number of rows existing, right? So what I will do is first I will find out the row count. For that, we have to use data table dot get row count. Get row count will return you the number of rows of data existing in our data table. So in this example, I'm mostly working in my global data table, right? We need to set the table. Okay. So what we have to do is data table dot get sheet. Okay. So we need to specify the sheet ID. Sheet ID for as of now, right? Global is starts with a sheet ID 1 and action 1 is with sheet ID 2. Like that, the respective actions will have the respective sheet IDs. For example, if I have action 2, then it will be sheet ID with 3, right? Because now we are configuring and we are retrieving the values from the global sheet, I need to specify the sheet ID as 1. Okay. So once I set my data sheet and after that once I have the row count, I need to traverse through each individual row. For that I put a for loop for I equal to 1 to row count. Okay. Okay. After that what we have to do is we need to specify which row of data we need to access, right? For that what we have to do is data table dot set current row. Current row, what it will do is it will set the pointer to that row, right? Okay. So while the loop iterates, right? It for the first iteration it will be holding with a value 1, after that 2, 3 respectively. Okay. I am using two parameters to retrieve the values from these two parameters. In order to retrieve any cell value from a datasheet, what we have to do is data table dot value. Okay, the first parameter is parameter id, right? What is the parameter id for input 1? It is with the parameter id 1. And the sheet id, the next one is sheet id, in which sheet we are in which sheet our data is there. It is there in global data sheet, so its sheet id is 1, right? Like that, in the same way, once you have input 1 and input 2, for input 2 I am putting it into this ip2 variable. Okay, and the parameter id for the second input is 2, is it is 2, whereas my sheet id for that is global, so which is in the first sheet id, right? Once it retrieves these two values, what I need to do? I need to sum up these two values and put it in my third parameter, right? So what I will do here is data table dot value. What is the parameter ID? Third parameter ID, and the sheet ID is 1. Okay, equal to, what I have to do is, here I just wanted to mention one point. Whenever we are retrieving a value from a data sheet, any specific cell value from a data sheet, it will be of type string. Okay, because these are we are like treating these inputs as an integer values, we need to typecast those values, right? So first what I have to do is I am so see, so what I am trying to say here is I am typecasting these values to integer type. Okay, let's see in ip2. Okay, that's it. So what it will do, it first sets the row. For the first iteration it will be first row, second row, like that. Once the row is set, I will be retrieving the values using data table dot value, where the first parameter is parameter id. Here input 1 has the parameter id 1, input 2 has the parameter id 2, and the sum value, this parameter have a value 3, right? So I'm getting these two values, and the sum of these two values I'm putting it into my third parameter. Okay, okay, let's start debug it, and I will show you what are the values it picking up and all. Before we going to execute this one, we need to just set one setting, because I want to demonstrate like how it goes to each individual row, right? So for that, just need to click file, setting, in run tab. We need to choose run one iteration only. So what this settings will say is the whole script will be executed once, the whole part. Okay, whereas we will be iterating each individual row of data using this for loop. Okay, for example, if you have this option run on all rows, what it will do is the whole script will be executed as many number of data existing in my data table. What I am trying to say here is, if you choose this option, right, my whole script, like all these 8 lines of code, will be executed 5 times, right? So I don't want to execute all, but it's I want to execute one iteration where I have a for loop, it will iterate to each individual rows of data. Okay, let's start debugging it. Okay, Let's see what are the values it is picking up. Row count, what are the value? See, we have 5 rows of data, right? In our data table, we have 5 rows of data. So row count will have a value of 5. And let's see what is the IP1 and IP2 values. It is 3 and 4, right? See what values it picks. IP1 and IP2 are the values in IP1 and IP2 are 3 and 4. Did you see this? The value it is of string type. So the reason I typecasted it to integer type, right? So let's see whether it has set the value properly or not. It is 7. 3 plus 4 is 7, right? So it's set in the third parameter. Okay. Like that in the now the value of I is 2. So it will set to the second row. Okay. Let's see what values it is getting in here. So IP2, IP1 and IP2 values are 56 and 23, right? 56 and 23. Like that it will iterate through each individual row of data in this for loop. Okay. And one more point I want to mention here is, see, whatever the whenever you are working in data tables, right? Before our execution starts, whatever the data table displayed in here is called design time data table. Once we start executing or debugging it, then that design table data table is replaced with a runtime data table. Okay, what we are viewing here is runtime data table. Okay, I'll show you. Like, see, once it will sum up all these values for all the rows. Okay, so it's done. Do you guys observe one point here? Whatever the values that we set in here are not visible in my third parameter. Yes, because it is a design time data table. Design time data, whatever the values that we are setting through script or execution, those values won't be displayed in our design time data table. So if you would like to see where exactly the runtime, see, even we set the values, I would like to see what values it retrieves. So in order to see those values are available in my test results, right? See, here in test result, you just click on runtime data table. Do you guys observe here? Whatever the values we updated, those values exist in runtime data table. So once the execution is over, okay, again the runtime data table is replaced with a design time data table. So whatever the values that you updated won't be visible. Okay, for example, you are more interested in viewing these values. Okay, you might be needing these values in somewhere. For that, what we have to do is we can use data table dot export. Okay, so the syntax will be like this: say e colon, what I can say, like temp data dot xls. Okay, let's see. So I don't want to see my results in here. Okay, for that what I will do is I'm just re-executing the same thing, and I want my output data should be in this file. Okay, let's run it. Let's see my data exists in the drive or not. See, temp data file got created where we have the runtime data table. Whatever the values and everything that we are in runtime data table will be displayed in this file. Okay. Okay, let me save my test. Okay, this is data table demo. Let's go through my presentation. Okay, the first slide. what we have is QTP enables us to use and run cells that are driven by data stored in the data table. What I mean to say here is we will be testing the test case with multiple test data using data table. Okay, to view or hide the data table pane, select view data table or click the data table toolbar button, which is nothing but directly click on data table to view this data table, or else for that also you should have this option selected, view data table. Okay, and the what it says, third point says is the data table has two types of sheets, one is global and another one is action sheet. Okay, global data sheet is common across multiple actions, right? Whatever the data which can be accessed in multiple actions, put all that kind of data in global sheet. Okay, and in second slide, the data your test uses is stored in the design time data table. For example, the input data whichever we want to configure, that can be configured in the design time data table. During run session, QTP creates and displays a live version of runtime data table. Okay, so at that time what will happen is runtime data table overwrites the design time data table. Okay, and once the run session ends, QTP closes the runtime data table and runtime data table is not saved with your test. Okay, so here what I did is, see, I have saved my test now, right? If you go and see the test, it won't save the runtime data table. It is only the design time data table only. And you can see the runtime version of the data in test results, runtime data table window. If you want to save the runtime data table, we can use the data table.export and the file name, okay, where our runtime data table values can be stored. Okay, there is no other way you can directly refer the data other than export method. Okay, when you save your test, QTP saves the data in XLS file. So our data can be saved with our test and it is with a file name called default.xls, right? And you can use datatable.import and datatable.export for using external file. So I would like to mention one point here, like, see, if my data is like 10 records or 20 records or 30 records, I can configure my data in data table. Even that is also sometimes not convenient, but for another example, if you have multiple, like, 100 records of data, then what you will do, will you first configure all those values in data table? For example, some external application will create some test data and you want to use that data, right? In that scenario, you won't spend time to copy those all those values into data table and configure those values and write a script like this. If in such scenarios, if you have the data in XLS file, what you can do is, okay, let me demonstrate you that thing as well here. So I'm just copying this code, Control C. Sorry, I will be using the same code in my next example as well. For that reason, I am copying this code. Okay. So what I am trying to say here is, for example, in this example, what I have say, some external file application has created a file like this. Okay. Okay. It might have multiple hundreds of records, right? Rather than configuring, reading, like copying these values from here to here, like 3, 4, something like that. Okay, what I am trying to say here is directly import the values from this Excel file to data table. We have a function called data table dot import. Okay, let me copy this code here. Control. Okay, This is where my input data exists, right? Okay, you can give whatever the file name where you have the input. You can specify that file name here, right? So at this moment I have my input data in this file. Okay, if you want to save as, okay. And what I will do here is I will import the data from that XLS file to my data table. After that, once I configure the, set the values also, I will be replacing this file with my runtime data table value. Okay. uh, and one more point I would like to mention here is, make sure whatever the XLS file you are using, it should be of old XML, XLS format, like XLS format only. If it is like XLSX, like new versions of Microsoft Office, like Excel, right, won't be supported. If you have create a file like temp data.xlsx, then it will throw you an error. So it is compatible only with the old Excel, like 97 to 2003 format. Okay. So this is my format. If you create a new Excel, then it is with XLS file, XLSX. So that is not supported here. Just make sure that. Okay, let's debug it. Let's see what it will do. Here I would like to cover the import functionality. Did you guys observe that? Once I click on import, what it did is it read the values in my external file and imported all the data into my data table. And the rest of the things are as I explained earlier, right? Oh, sorry, it's my bad. Let me re-execute. I just forgot to set this setting. Like run one iteration only. Okay, that's it. Now, did you guys see this? Here I didn't configure any values here. What during import, it import all the data into this data table. Okay, that is how data table dot import and export will work. Okay, you can save the data table at default. Okay, we can use data table dot import and data table dot export for using external Excel file. You can save the data table at default location, or you can specify the name and location. For example, say this is a whatever the file I am using, right? Which can, if I didn't configure anything in here, then the default .xls will be saved with my test, right? If my input data, like this temp file can be accessed from multiple tests. Okay, in those scenarios, what we can do is we can set that file path like this: file settings, go to resources, data table. Do you guys see the default location under test directory? Or else we can specify the location where this XLS file should be can be saved. Okay. So this is more about like default.xls. Okay. The next one, the use of complex and or nested formulas in the data table is not supported. So what I am trying to cover here is, for example, okay, okay, uh, let me do the same example here. Rather than importing it, okay, it won't. Okay, I will open my previously created test. Okay, where I have configured all these values, right? So what I am trying to cover here is whatever you are seeing in data table, right, which have all the functionalities of Excel. Okay, so for example, say in this place I would like to use a Excel function called sum. Okay, sum. This is A1 colon B1. Did you guys observe? Whatever the functions and everything that we can use in Excel, we can use the same thing here. If I just drag it here, do you guys see this? So which have all the functionalities that are there in Excel. Okay, but one important point here is don't use heavyweight formulas. If you use heavyweight formulas in data tables, then there are chances that those statements will fail. That is what I would like to mention here. The use of complex and or nested formulas in the data table is not supported. Okay, and in the next slide. So we need to follow these general guidelines while working with the data table. Okay, we must enter the data in rows from top to bottom and left to right. Okay, what I'm trying to say here is, for example, I cannot enter any values directly in this column. Did you guys see? Even I am trying to enter any data, it won't let me allow to enter data here. I can configure the values from top to bottom, left to right. Okay, if I try to enter a value here, it will allow. Okay, and the value written from the data table is always converted to a string by default, which I explained earlier. Okay, and in order to delete any data, use edit delete. Okay, so what I am trying to say here is, for example, if I select this data, okay, if I click delete, did you guys one thing you guys observe here is, whenever we configure some data in here, the border is displayed with a black color. Okay, so for example here I'm just clicking delete here. So you guys think that the data got deleted, right? But what I will do here is same. Okay, okay, I'm commenting everything here. So here when I say print data table dot row count, sorry, it's my bad, get row count. Okay, so when I print get row count, we are in the assumption that when I have the data like this and if I delete, okay, we have only 5 rows of data. Let's see, let's execute it. But it retrieves 6. So what does it mean is the data is not, the data is not visible, but it is not completely deleted. The graceful way of deleting a data when you configure any values here is, sorry, the graceful way is by selecting that row and right click it, go to edit and delete. Okay, or else you can use the control K shortcut. Now, did you guys observe that the gray border is displayed? When you have the data, it will be with the black color. The border is with the black color. When the data is deleted, then it will be converted into gray color. Now, if you run it, it will be displayed the row count as 5. That is how you have to delete the data from the data table. Okay. That's all in this video. Thanks for watching. Please leave your comments about this video.